On the road. Thank you all for being here today. I'd like to welcome everyone to the third meeting, the Interim Joint Committee on Transportation for the 2021 Interim. Before we call roll, I'd like to remind all members and those in the audience to silence their cell phones. Also, all the meeting materials for today's meeting are currently available on the Transportation Committee page on the LRC website. Finally, I'd like to recognize a new staff person to our committee, Ashley Nash. Started as an analyst with the committee in the middle of July. She is a native of Georgetown and a graduate of Transylvania University, as well as the Chase Law School at Northern Kentucky University. We're happy to welcome her to our committee and look forward to working with her. And if you all would, please join with me. Give her a round of applause and welcome her. Okay, yes, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Senator Berg, Senator Embry, Senator Hornback, Senator Smith, Senator Storm, here. Senator Turner, here. Senator Wheeler, Senator Wilson, Senator Wise, Senator Yates, Representative Branscombe,
Present.
Representative Bratcher,
Here.
Representative Bridges, here. Representative Dixon,
Present.
Representative Fleming,
Present.
Representative Hale, present. Representative Heverin,
Present.
Representative Regina Huff, Representative Thomas Huff,
Here.
Representative Lewis,
Here.
Representative Maddox, Representative McCool,
Here.
Representative McPherson, here. Representative Miller, Representative Palumbo, here. Representative Santoro, here. Representative Smith, here. Representative Stevenson, here. Representative Ashley Tackett Lafferty, present. Representative Thomas,
Present.
Representative Westrom, Representative Wheatley,
Here.
Co-Chair Upchurch, here. Chairman Higdon.
Here. We do have a quorum, and with that said, entertain a motion on to approve the meeting minutes from July the 5th meeting. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Our first item of business today is Secretary Jim Gray, Kentucky Department of Transportation. Please come forward, Mr. Gray, Mr. Secretary, and whoever else you're going to bring with you there. And you can introduce yourself for the record. And I have a few things to say about you before you get started. So.
I don't know if I better turn this on or not, or maybe try to turn yours off.
No, I think Chairman. Mr. Secretary, I wanted to publicly thank you for the invitation for Representative Santoro and I to visit Eastern Kentucky to tour the damage, and those Eastern Kentucky legislators are here that we certainly want to be very supportive of the getting Eastern Kentucky, getting those residents back to something called normal. Mr. Secretary, I did hear a nickname for you when on that tour, and it might sound really, it's a real compliment to be honest with you, the master of disaster. And Mr. Secretary, with the Ben Spence Bridge, the tornado in western Kentucky, and now the flooding in eastern Kentucky, you've had more than your share of issues to deal with. And I saw firsthand with Representative Santoro, and I'm sure a lot of these eastern Kentucky legislators can speak up and say the same thing. I want to commend you for your leadership, and you were on the job, and it was amazing to see the personnel from the Kentucky Department of Transportation, the trucks that looked like an army of Department of Transportation trucks in the area doing like you said, doing what needed to be done. Just get her done. And didn't matter if it was state or county or privately owned, wherever the help was needed, your instruction was to get it done. And like I said, I want to commend you for that and publicly thank you. And I'm sure other legislators will speak up and offer some gratitude also. With that said, introduce yourself for the record, and the floor is yours.
All right, sir. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Jim Gray, and gratefully Secretary of Transportation for Governor Beshear and the Commonwealth today. And I will say I will accept your acknowledgement, sir, only with the condition that I am allowed to say, just as the governor has said, that we stand on the shoulders of all the employees of the cabinet of this, and especially of the Department of Highways. And I'm going to go into a little bit of that right now, if that's okay.
Yes, sir.
All
Please
right,
proceed.
sir.
And I'm
And
in
let
agreement.
me begin acknowledging Chairman Higdon, co-chair of Upchurch, and all members of the committee. I always make it a point, having walked in your moccasins, some of you as an elected official, always try to make it a point to say thank you for your public service. Thank you for your public service. So I want to introduce folks who are with me today who have participated substantially in this project, in the leadership of this project. Of course, Deputy Secretary, former Secretary Mike Hancock, Department of Highways, State Highway Engineer James Ballinger, who has been on the ground, I would say, at least half of the days since the 16 days since July 28th. Commissioner Bobby Joe Lewis, Rural and Municipal Aid Commissioner, and our Assistant State Highway Engineer, John Moore, who is the project manager for this project and is doing an really extraordinary job. You know this fella, Kenny Bishop, and when I complete in about 10 or 12 minutes my remarks and the slides, I'm going to introduce you to Corbett Caudle. Corbett is one of our 12 chief district engineers that many of you all engage with in your own jurisdictions, your own districts, like Representative Santoro deals with Bob Yeager routinely. And Corbett is our chief in District 10. And the principal counties affected there, impacted, of course, were Breathitt and Perry. And I asked him to join us on Friday when I was in Jackson, and just to share his personal observations and experience as well. So I've already said that I am enormously proud of the work of the employees at the Transportation Cabinet. I have great admiration for all of them and am grateful to be able to say that I'm the Transportation Secretary today. And that goes for every one of them who's had anything to do with the recovery from this disaster, whether they were operating equipment or inspecting and documenting damage to roads and bridges, or transporting supplies and equipment, or issuing driver's licenses to people who had lost theirs in the flooding. All of these and others really too numerous to describe have worked morning, noon, and night, often 7 days a week, to this point. 16 of our employees have had their own homes flooded with loss of their possessions, and at least one had his home washed away completely. And yet, they all went right to work. What I've seen is caring and selfless people and a collective determination to overcome what nature has thrown at us. Together, as you all know well, we will grind our way through what promises to be still a long and tough and difficult recovery, but recovery it will be. Now, I regret to say that we have learned quite a bit about responding to disasters, especially weather disasters, in the last couple of years. But it's not new to the Transportation Cabinet. Many of these folks over the years have been in leadership roles and in operating roles when disasters have occurred. You know that we've had severe snow and ice storms, other lesser flooding events, and then the tremendous disasters of tornadoes in western Kentucky last December, followed by widespread flooding in eastern Kentucky 2.5 weeks ago. But then, when disasters piled on disaster, you learn something else too, something that goes way beyond just the nuts and bolts of disaster response. You learn what your people are made of. And of course, we are still recovering in western Kentucky, and it will be much the same in eastern Kentucky. A few days after the flood, a national publication ran a story about all the organizations that were mobilizing to rush into eastern Kentucky. And the story noted that they included a delegation from Bremen, 300 miles away in Muhlenberg County. The paper noted that Bremen had been shredded by the tornadoes of last December and was still trying to rebuild. And I'm sure some of you all seen this story and remember it. But the story said that the people who rushed in to help in Bremen right after the tornadoes had included the mayor of Heinemann, Terry Neese, who spent 5 days running an excavator. 2 weeks ago, then, the mayor of Bremen, Alan Miller, phoned the mayor Neese to say it was his turn to return the favor, and he was organizing multiple trips to Heinemann with supplies and volunteer labor. The story called it an example of a kind of generosity ingrained in the culture of Kentucky. Now, that's not news to any one of you here. I know that every one of you on this committee could not agree more that it is the kind of generosity ingrained in the culture of Kentucky. And as Governor Beshear has said a number of times, we are all Team Kentucky on this. Okay, now I've got a few slides to share with you all that illustrate what you've no doubt seen already. It's just to punctuate it. It has been all hands on deck. The Department of Highways, the Department of Vehicle Regulation, Department of Rural and Municipal Aid, Aviation, State Highway Engineer's Office, and the Secretary's Office of Safety. This shows an image. Well, that's all right. Let's stay where we are, Kenny. And I failed to introduce Kenny when I introduced, and you all know Kenny. So he's right here helping me with technical support that I could not do without, and every other liaison activity with the legislature. So more than 200 Department of Highways personnel from Districts 1 through 9 have deployed to eastern Kentucky to support the 860 employees of Districts 10, 11, and 12. Now let me say that again. More than 200 employees deployed from Districts 1 through 9 to help support the 860 employees of Districts 10, 11, and 12. More volunteered and are on standby. Our personnel and vehicles have covered 391,000 miles and logged 91,000 hours of engine activity within the designated disaster area from July the 28th to August the 9th. We get those figures from the GIS tracking that are used to identify our fuel costs. Okay, Kenny, thank you. Personnel have included engineers, equipment operators, entire maintenance crews, bridge specialists, and mechanics. Equipment they brought included backhoes and dump trucks, semi-tractors, excavators, skid steers, pavers, rollers, culvert cleaners, sign trucks with a post driver. KYT personnel were instrumental in transporting critical goods and equipment into the area as well. That includes water, meals ready to eat, cots, travel trailers for shelter, and work trailers. One event that we had the opportunity to work with, the chance to work with Kentucky Emergency Management on, I got a call from Director Slinker one afternoon, and he said, "Jim, can you help us? We've got to get a valve. It's in Nashville, and we need to reopen Buckhorn Lake, the park, for use as a shelter." And we were able to save about 4 hours. Stephanie Krask, who is a Department of Aviation pilot, flew to Nashville to pick up that valve, which was essential to reopening. Department of Vehicle Regulation deployed pop-up driver licensing units to 3 state resort parks and 3 disaster recovery centers. And this is important. As of yesterday, they had issued 1,599, that's real close to 1,600, licenses and IDs to people in the flooded counties, many of whom had lost everything. KYTC crews have been working not just on clearing state routes, but as Chairman Higdon said, but also helping overwhelmed counties clear local roads. We've executed debris removal and oversight and contracts inspection as well. Cities and counties were offered the opportunity to essentially piggyback on a state contract through a mutual aid agreement. By doing this, we were able to get to debris removal faster. 11 of the 13 counties covered by the disaster declaration have accepted the offer. McGoffin and Wolf haven't, but they didn't get a lot of debris or haven't experienced a lot of debris removal is required. Several cities have also joined in the contract, including Whitesburg, Jenkins, Fleming Neon, and Hindman. Now I'm going to show some of the slides of the damage around the 13-county designated disaster area. This is a washed-out road, as you can tell. It's in District 12. This is a slide of when Chairman Higdon and Chairman Santoro visited. This was in the Jackson office, District 10 office in Jackson. That's Corbett there on the left. Judge Noble, Breathitt County Judge, and myself. And we were looking at the maps of Breathitt and Perry that Corbett was taking us through. This next slide shows a collapsed bridge over Grapevine Creek on the Chaveys School Road in Perry County. And just for context, in 16 days, we have inventoried 1,098 bridges in the disaster zone. KYTC and consultants employed by KYTC inspected them all. So far, 56 bridges have been identified for replacement, and 52 others have been identified as needing repair. And that's as of Sunday, August the 14th. We've already begun the process to replace an initial group of 11 bridges in Knott, Letcher, Perry, and Pike counties using existing and emergency contracts. In 9 of the 11 cases, residents lost motor vehicle access to their homes when those bridges were knocked out. And in those cases, we are building temporary crossings called on-site diversions using culvert pipes that are covered with a hard-packed roadbed. So these next images, I'm going to move through them pretty quickly. This just showed an example of conditions in Letcher County. Our crews cleared at least 153 landslides and mudslides and unclogged dozens of culverts and drain structures. Kentucky 451 in Perry, I think we've got 2 slides of that, don't we, Corbett?
Yes, that's right.
Again, we're still in Perry County here. Slide 20. We're in Letcher now. Where are we? District 12. Okay, let me get this out. So let me talk about debris removal. Have we shown downtown Whitesburg yet? Downtown Whitesburg. Yep. Okay, here we are. Nine companies bid on the debris contract. The low bidder was Ashbrit, which is a national company based in Florida, but very experienced in this kind of work. In fact, they were on the ground in Western Kentucky. They were working in Hopkins for Jack Whitfield, county judge, and the county, and they had a contract with the Corps of Engineers as well. Through this past Sunday, Ashbrit trucks had removed almost 1,000 loads of debris in Breathitt, Floyd, Knott, Letcher, Perry, and Pike counties. Now, another company's name is ER Assist, is monitoring the work of Ashbrit to ensure everything is done properly, including documentation to ensure we get reimbursement from FEMA. ER Assist has a master agreement with the state, and local governments can avail themselves of its services as well. The idea is that no one wants to leave money on the table by failing to adhere to FEMA's rules and protocols on documenting and auditing. And we should all bear in mind that, and I suspect that you all know this, but just to punctuate it, FEMA does not provide funding up front. FEMA reimburses a percentage of eligible expenditures. Okay, next slide, Kenny. This is, we pretty, for all effective purposes, we lost our maintenance facility in Letcher County. This is illustrating the maintenance garage that was flooded. That's on July the 28th. That shows the maintenance facility from the exterior. That on the 28th, 29th, 30th. This does illustrate the cleanup, partially cleaned up in Letcher. It's giving our folks a place where they can work again or convene and work from there. Okay, let me talk real quickly about our KYTC crews that are hauling travel trailers into the flood area. I would say that we learned quite a bit from Western Kentucky experience. We were fortunate that we had 70 trailers that were remaining in the original purchase from the tornado project. We were able to move those into Eastern Kentucky within just a few days. This is where we now have 93 trailers. And on Thursday, our team went to Louisiana to check on the availability and the condition of trailers that Governor Edwards had offered to Governor Beshear from Hurricane Ida. And they had something like 4,000. We're looking, of course, we're not looking at that number, but we found the trailers. Kyle Pode, who is leading this, he's our District 1. He's Corbett's counterpart in Paducah. Corbett's been helping us with this project, with the trailer project in Eastern Kentucky now because of what he learned there, transferring that knowledge and those skills. And he's identified the first tranche of 64. These are the locations where we currently have trailers installed. Jenny Wiley, can you back it up, Kenny, or not? If you can't, that's okay. Jenny Wiley, Mind Made Adventure Park, which is just on the other side of, just on the other side of the Sportsplex in Hindman, outside of Hindman. The Crockett'sville Campground in Boonville, and Carr Creek near in Perry County. Okay, Mr. Chairman, I said 12 minutes, and I hope I hadn't broken that. I want you all to hear from on the ground, and that's Corbett Caudle. Before we get to questions, before we get to comments, if you would, just for a minute. On the morning of the 28th, Corbett I called him, or he called me, I can't remember. But anyway, we knew things were tough and challenging and difficult. Corbett lives outside of Hazard in Perry County. His office is in Breathitt in Jackson. That's where the Transportation Cabinet's office is for the district. And he's driven that for 22 years. He's been with the cabinet for 27. And when we were talking that morning, I said, well, Corbett, what's it like? And if you know this fella, you know that he is one not to mince words. He has an economy of words. And he said, Jim, it's catastrophic. And he's not one to exaggerate. And so I thought it would be worthwhile for him to share some of his thoughts of what the last 16 days have been like. And as I do that, I share with y'all that he had this paper, the Breathitt Advocate, on his bulletin board, on a tack board in his office last Friday. And I asked him if I could have a copy of it. And if y'all can see, it uses Corbett's words. It's catastrophic flood.
Corbett, welcome to the committee. And I want to publicly thank you for the hospitality you showed Representative Santoro and myself when we were there at the invitation of Secretary Gray. And thank you publicly, too, for your dedication to the citizens of District 10, Commonwealth of Kentucky. And thank you for being here today. And the floor is yours. Please identify yourself for the record, and please proceed.
My name is Corbett Caudle.
There you go.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Well, you can hear me now.
My name's Corbett Caudle, and I'm the Chief District Engineer in District 10, like Secretary Gray said. And I'm responsible for 10 counties in that area of the state, and that I'm going to go over those real quick. It's Breathitt, Morgan, Magoffin, Menifee, Owsley, Perry, Powell, Estill, Wolf, and Lee. Those are the counties that I'm responsible for the transportation activities on. And like Secretary Gray said, I live in Perry County. I work in Jackson. And what I want to do real briefly, just take you through that night of the 28th when this event happened. It's not uncommon for chiefs to get phone calls at night, and I got a phone call that night at about 2 a.m. My son woke me up, and he was up at that time. You know, everybody in the room's got children, and I think he was playing video games. But that night, but he come to my bedside and said, "Dad, somebody wants you on the phone." And there was a guy, and I know this guy. He lives in Breathitt County, and he was hysterical. He'd lost 2 or 3 vehicles. It was flooding at his house while he was talking to me. And I thought, you know, we have flash floods, and I've dealt with a whole lot of those in my career, and I really still didn't understand the magnitude of what we were dealing with today. But I told him, I said, I'll get somebody to you. Just let me get off the phone. I'll make a phone call. So I got up and called our foreman in that county, in Breathitt County, and he was out. He was working. And these guys it's unbelievable what they do for us, the foremans in these counties. And he wasn't excited. He just said, Corbett, it's raining hard. He said, the creeks are out of their banks. He said, I've talked to this family, and he said, I'm on my way to them. He said, I'm going to get to them if I can. He said, I'm not sure that I can make it. And my last words to him was, I said, don't take a chance on anything. I said, if you don't feel comfortable, let's wait till it gets daylight and we'll assess and we'll work tomorrow. I hung up with him and went to bed. Still not, as we get phone calls every other night, still not understanding what we were dealing with. I went back to sleep. I got up early next morning, got ready to go to work. And it's about a 50-mile commute for me one way to Jackson. And I've drove this road for 27 years, 2 times a day. I've never seen water on Kentucky 15 in my entire career. And I get your arm, that's a lot of trips in a year's time. Never had I seen water close to being on Kentucky 15. And for the people that's not familiar with Kentucky 15, that's the main arterial route that connects Jackson and Hazard. It's our north-south route from Campton to Letcher County, basically 23. So I started on my way that morning. I got out, drove through Hazard. Still, I could tell it, it rained, but water was up a little bit, still not seeing a whole lot. But when I got north of Hazard, and guys, that's where the damage was at. It was north of Hazard, for me, in my counties. It was north of Hazard and south of Jackson. And if you're looking at a map, that's an idea of where this, and that's what I was showing the secretary in the picture that he'd shown y'all. But when I first got into Breathitt County, I knew we was in trouble. Water had been over the road, an area that I'd never seen. And this, when I'm talking about, it wasn't just in the road. They was places that was 7 or 8 foot over top of the road. And until you come and see some of this, it's hard for me to paint a picture with words. But long story short, I made it through one side. My guys was there working. I'd stop and talk to them. The water had receded. I made it to the next location that water was over the road, and it was still 4 foot over the road at 9 o'clock that Thursday morning. Cell phones wasn't working, no cell phone service. Our landlines were down in Breathitt County, no internet service, so we couldn't communicate. And I tried until about 9:30 or 10 o'clock, and I just give up on getting to Jackson. So, and all of our side roads that we could make our way around, I thought, well, they're probably underwater too. So I give up and turned around and went back to Hazard to a section office where I could get cell service and get on a computer and have a landline. And basically I worked from there that entire day. But Kentucky 15, the next morning I was able to make it to Jackson. And that main arterial route, and this route was built sometime in the 60s, so it was well built. Pavement, bridges. There was still quite a bit of damage did, and just driving in, I knew that we were in trouble. We still couldn't get on our other routes because water was still up on a lot of them. But by Saturday evening, Sunday morning, we'd made it out on those routes. And again, guys, I've said this once, and I'll say it again, I've been in the district 27 years, and never in my lifetime have I seen so much damage. There's a lot of, the personal property damage tear your heart out. If you drive up these roads and look at it, it makes it hard for me to sleep at night. But our infrastructure damage too. We've had tornadoes, nothing like the Western Kentucky has dealt with this past year. But we have had tornadoes. We had tornadoes in Morgan, McGoffin. We recovered from those, a lot of damage, but the infrastructure damage wasn't there. We've got slips and slides. Y'all seen photos. It's just, we'll be years getting our roads back to where they were at, and where they were at before this happened. And I don't know about the personal loss, the personal property loss. I don't know how long it'll take those folks. It's devastating. And that's just a picture in my mind. We've worked, we've been working 6 or 7 days a week since this event started, and we'll get it. We're not going to give up. We'll get it, but it's going to take a while.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We'll open the floor for questions now. Any questions of the Secretary or Corbett? Those who don't know Kenny Bishop, you need to get his phone number. He's the man. If he's our contact with the transportation cabinet, and you call Kenny and it's taken care of. So thank you, Kenny, for all that you do, and I know there's several of us here that are high maintenance, and we we appreciate you taking our call anyway. So I do. Representative Tackett Lafferty, you have a question.
I actually have a comment.
Thank
if
you.
that's
Please
okay.
proceed.
Well, as many of you know, I represent Eastern Kentucky. I represent Floyd and Pike counties, and I live in District 12. So I understand that the Transportation Department, how hard they've been working. I don't know where to begin in saying thank you. I want to say thank you to the governor. I want to say thank you to all the representatives here who have called, sent donations, visited our area to try to help, to shovel mud. I want to say thank you to all the groups that have come together. You know, when you think about who helped save us the day that our water started rising, when we talk about how important our volunteer fire departments are and our churches and our communities, our volunteer firefighters and our churches have literally uplifted our community throughout this whole process. I want to touch on what you talked about, saying thank you to Jenny Wiley State Park in my district. I know it's one of the 3 parks that are open right now. Jenny Wiley State Park is housing lodging in the hotel 177 people in our community. I didn't even realize our resort park held that many people. In addition to that, our travel trailers, we have nearly 20 on our campsites. We have about 47 people housed in those trailers right now, and they're hoping to have about 30 at Jenny Wiley before we're finished. I want to say thank you to our school boards as well. They have not only helped to feed all of the people that are being lodged in these places, we also had an overflow. And our district was hit very hard. But I really mourn for places like Knott County and Breathitt who have lost lives in addition to all of the property and infrastructure that they've lost. And for instance, in my district, just to share a short story about on the ground, you know, obviously I've been on the ground every day since this flood has happened. But the evening that the flood happened in our district, my son is on a football team. And the football team starts sending messages. Who has talked to this football player last? We had a young football player who had tried to go get his grandmother out of her home along with his sister. And for 8 hours, no one could find him or his sister. Now, fortunately, he had just lost cell phones. You know, they lost everything they had. Chargers are hard enough to find at a house with a teenager, trust me. So in a situation with a flood, it's even harder. But they ended up finding him about 8 hours later. He has lost everything that he has. We were able to immediately get him, along with these 177 people, into a travel trailer at Jenny Wiley Lodge, so he and his family as well are safe. And you know, as we all know, with football and with our school-age children, school's about to start. So a lot of these families have lost almost everything 3-4 weeks before school starts. So I want to say thank you to all the volunteers and organizations who have sent water, clothing, who have helped to try to provide for our community, because at this point, you know, we not only needed it then, but we're going to need it. We need it now, and we're going to need more help in the future with long-term recovery. But I just want to say thank you. It's reassuring to see things. For instance, their football team a few days later went out and helped clean up around the flood, and you wouldn't imagine how helpful a big team of football players were to tear out carpet. People who have had flooding in 2-story houses, tearing out carpet in 2nd stories. Now that's tragedy, because in places like where I live, you know, some of these homes were built prior to any type of floodplain information that we received. And they're very hard for people to sell and get out of, because now that they're in a floodplain, it's hard to sell those homes. But in Eastern Kentucky, in addition to the floodplain areas, a lot of these places had never flooded before. They didn't know they needed flood insurance. So we have needed a lot of help, and we have received a lot of help, and I just want to say thank you.
Mr. Secretary, seeing, okay, we do have another question. Senator?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mine's more of a statement also. And I will start out by saying that 3 of the counties were my counties, and I've been hands-on with helping deliver from the helicopter to my truck 4 days in a row hauling gallons of water. And Chairman Gray saw me there. I've got a crew. We started a week ago today and worked till midnight about 10 o'clock that first night, and I've worked daily cleaning up the town that got hurt the worst in Letcher County. And I guess we're as he would call it, the private contractor there, because the only other people's been there is FEMA. We've taken care of that town. That's Fleming Neon, which got hurt the worst, and it's just terrible. The last person I dealt with before I stopped, my boys are working there today, but it was a 91-year-old woman that talked about all the floods she'd been through, and I went through the 57 flood, so I know about floods. And it is just, my mother waded water up to here and thought one of the children was drowned in the water, and we were water dogging down trying to find a kid, and then it got up steps. But anyway, this is traumatic. I think the people that have been there, there's been churches and people come from everywhere. But I also want it to be known that Rand Paul is personally there, and I used him to help work with FEMA. Senator McConnell was there, and he personally got on the phone with FEMA for some problems that we were having. It was trying to find a place to dump and little things, and could have been big things. But and I talked to Jim with the secretary there 2 days ago, I guess it was, and they didn't even have a place to dump, but when I got a call from Rand Paul's office, we started the thing, and I went directly to Secretary's staff, the one that's over the department that I work with there out of Pike County, and I believe I got a call from his right hand that's sitting on his left side there on the same day to provided the places to dump, because I said we'll be there Monday. So it's been a working effort by a number of people. I've got a lot to say about it. I've seen problems and going to make suggestions legislatively later on, but we're still working there, and I'd be there today if I wasn't here. And I wouldn't be here, but I had a doctor's appointment this morning, so I just made it a double trip to come down here today. And I may well go back to tomorrow. I've got 2 meetings here, but I'll check with my guys and see. We've got a lot done there, and, but it's just so terrible. Just like the pictures are just a minute part of what you see when you drive there. And every house that I picked up, truckload after truckload, have set everything outside, and it's just, they have nothing. They have nothing. It's like that 91-year-old lady. Her house is this high from that floor down there up, and it's above the roadway that you drive every day. And the water got in. She had a car parked in the garage at that level, and the car got up in her car. Water got up in her car. And she was really hurt, explaining to me about how she's ever going to get that car. She drove a few months ago, 91 years old, living by herself. Her husband died a couple years ago. That's just one. It's so tragic. But there's been a great, the churches have came from everywhere, and just people have come bringing food. But you can't do so much to help these people because they've lost everything. And I just like to thank everybody that's been involved. The transportation trucks go by there, zooming by every day, and it's obvious what they're doing in that county. Especially the area that I've been working in and the roads we're on. Those 2 schools got destroyed there, so it's going to be a long time before we get back to some civilization there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Turner. Representative Stevenson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I've talked about it enough. I think most of you probably know that I am from Knott County. My parents still live, and I grew up about 5 minutes from that sportsplex and the My Main Adventure Park. And I've been really emotional sitting here looking at these pictures because Corbett's right. These photos cannot prepare you for what you see. And when you drive up a holler and you see houses that are just gone, they're just gone. It's so hard, and it's so hard not to be there every day. It's hard to be here and still do what I need to do and not be there. I've been there as much as I possibly could, and I'm going back on Friday. But so thank you, even though it's your job, thank you that you're there every day for these people. Catastrophic, tragic. I mean, they don't make words for what we're seeing there right now. And if you haven't been there yet, I urge you, please try to find time to go down and help these people. I know that people are sending money and sending supplies, but they need manual labor. There are still people sitting in houses caked in mud. There are people living in tents. Our people need help. So thank you guys for what you're doing so much. And thanks for those of you that are there and you live there, and I know what you're doing every day. We appreciate you guys. Thanks.
Thank you. Representative Santoro.
I just want to, Corbett, thank you for the time we spent together. You know, we're talking about roads, houses. What about water, electric? Can you comment? Are we halfway restoring anything as far as the phone, internet? Do you know? I think that was all destroyed too. No one's mentioned that. Those are essentials.
I think, well, I know the electric, as far as I know, there may be a few people without electricity, but most of that's been restored. And that was a big part of our mission, getting those roads open, just passable, where those guys could get in and do their work too. That was the first part of what we was trying to do. Our internet and telephone and stuff there in Jackson was working a few days after the event, so all that's back and restored. The water, I think, is going to be a different story because it's out in most of our counties, and it follows the state route. So anywhere we had a culvert or a bridge or something washed out, those water lines have been washed out. So I think the water's been restored. The closest spot or the closest vicinity to the water plant, if that makes sense. But as you get further out in the counties, those are the folks that's still without water.
Thank you. I just want to let everyone know it's more than just roads and houses. It's all the essentials that we need. Thank you very much.
You're exactly right.
I also know there were many schools that were damaged. We passed, I think, 3 schools the day we toured that been underwater. So, I see no further questions. Corbett and Kenny, Mr. Secretary, thank you all. And Representative Smith.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. I thought you had a list there. I just want to wait my turn. But just a quick statement on Mr. Secretary. I want to tell you that in our area, we weren't hit with the high waters, but we've seen a lot of families as families, and there's ties all the way up in eastern Kentucky. But I appreciate how quick the administration was on top of this. One thing that I seen, and I just want to make a statement on and see maybe you could reply to it. Tornadoes aren't just confined to a western or to an area in the state. They can hit. We've seen that in eastern Kentucky when it hit, I believe, Morgan. The same way, and I'm going to make this statement, then maybe you could reply to it. 6 inches of rain in a few hours. If it hit Louisville or if it hit Lexington or any other parts of the state, mostly around rivers or areas that have running water, damage is going to happen. It's not just like it said, it's pouring on the poor. We got to hear that statement, but it could happen on any part of the state when you bring 6 inches of rain within a few hours. And we've seen the videos of it being a major river coming off the mountains. It wasn't just creeks rising. We've seen 12, even higher foot of a river coming off, wiping people out. Could you make a statement on what across the state, what it would have done if it hadn't just been in that area, but if it had been parts of the other state, are we not looking at devastation across the state on anybody that would get that type of rain within that quick a time?
I don't know if I could speculate, Representative Smith, on that too much. What I do know is that the damage and the destruction to the infrastructure in these counties is enormous. And as Corbett said, and what we're doing is we're trying to examine that, get an inventory of it, and do our best to estimate what that cost may be to rebuild. And that's our mission today. And to acknowledge, as many of you all have already done, just how destructive and damaging, and as Representative Stevenson said, you really can't find the right adjectives to describe it. I think it would have been destructive anywhere, but I suspect it is even at a higher level here, and it's gonna be a time to get the rebuild done.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will say this: seeing is believing. I've seen floods before, but this was driving that day. It was like a flood and a tornado combined. We saw where floodwaters had gotten into houses. We also saw foundation after foundation after foundation where a home used to be, and they were just gone, wiped. They were spread out over 10 miles down the creek. And it's just it's amazing. So thank you all for your work. Corbett, thank you. Kenny and Mr. Secretary. And I'm sure our hearts go out to the people of Eastern Kentucky that are suffering. And we will have a special session, I understand, here shortly, and maybe we can be of additional help. And you'll see the commitment from the General Assembly to help. So thank you all. Next up is Robin Brewer. She's the money lady. And Robin, if you will, identify yourself for the record and please proceed.
Robin Brewer. I'm the Executive Director of the Office
Robin, turn your microphone on, please, or pull it closer to you. The green light is on.
All right, is that better?
That's much better.
All right,
Thank
sorry
you.
about that. My name is Robin Brewer. I'm the Executive Director of the Office of Budget and Fiscal Management for Transportation. So I have just a few slides today. I'll be very brief about how we ended the fiscal year. So as the committee, I'm sure, remembers, back on December 17th of 2021, the Consensus Forecasting Group, or CFG, came back in and, as they normally do, before an upcoming legislative budget session, and they came in and they revised the current year revenue estimate for FY 2022, as well as approved the official revenue estimates for FY 23 and 24. So during that December meeting, the CFG revised the revenue estimate up to $1,680,100,000 from $1,609,200,000. So actual road fund revenues for FY 2022 totaled $1,675,400,000. And that was an increase of 2% from the prior fiscal year. However, total revenue came in about $4.7 million below the revised official estimate for FY 2022. However, it did not result in any spending reductions. Our motor fuel tax revenue collected was about $13.7 million less than the enacted revenue estimate, as high pump prices discouraged consumption on the demand side. Our motor vehicle usage tax revenue collected, which is the sales tax on vehicle purchases, reached an all-time high of $629.1 million, and it was about $9.4 million more than the estimate. And then all of the other accounts taken together were about close to $500,000 less than the estimate. So collections showed modest growth for the first 3 quarters of the fiscal year before declining in the final 3 months of the year. Growth rates for the 4 quarters were 3.5%, 2.8%, 5.2%, and negative 2.6%. The decline in the 4th quarter was due primarily to the extremely high level of revenues collected last fiscal year, when receipts grew nearly 44% in the quarter because of timing issues that affected FY 2021 collections. Because the decline was moderate and revenue growth was strong enough over the first 9 months of the fiscal year, overall road fund collections were up over prior year levels. The gains were concentrated in the motor fuel and motor vehicle usage taxes, which grew 3.5% and 1.3% respectively. Motor fuel tax receipts grew by 3.5% despite higher gas prices, and they were robust in each of the first 3 quarters before declining in the final quarter in response to the faster rising gas prices. Quarterly growth rates for motor fuel taxes were 4.9%, 4.7%, 5.7%, and negative 0.8%. And as I stated previously, the motor vehicle usage tax collections reached an all-time high of $629.1 million, growing by 1.3%. Growth rates for the motor vehicle usage tax revenue for the 4 quarters were 3.8%, 2.3%, 7.8%, and negative 6.7%. So comparing our actual road fund revenues for FY 2022 to 2021, total 2022 receipts were about $33 million more than 2021 levels, which was an increase of about 2% from the prior fiscal year. Motor fuel tax receipts increased by, again, 3.5% for the year. Motor vehicle usage tax receipts were strong throughout the year and surpassed last year by 1.3%. And like I said before, all the other accounts taken together decreased about 0.5% compared to the prior year. So the official
Robin, can I interrupt you there for a second?
Sure.
On that slide that has the road fund revenues, and it goes down through there. What's under other? What's in that category?
That's basically everything outside of the motor fuel tax and motor vehicle usage. It includes our motor vehicle operator licensing fees, motor vehicle licensing fees, investment income, all of our permits. Our weight distance taxes in there as well. So it's several categories. Actually, I have a little bit more of a breakdown here on this very last slide, if you see. So those first 2 lines on this slide are the first 2 from the prior slide. And then you have your motor vehicle licensing category, weight distance, motor vehicle operators, investment, and then you still have another category, which includes lots of various permits and other taxes. So
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So here on our last slide here, this shows the official road fund revenue estimate that the CFG approved for FY 2023, which was $1,719,900,000. So according to the quarterly economic and revenue report for the 4th quarter of FY 2022, which is published by the Office of the State Budget Director, road fund revenues are forecasted to grow at a slightly more robust pace over the first 3 quarters of FY 2023, with collections increasing 3.7%. Growth rates ranging from 0.9% to 13.7% are expected in most of the accounts, with the exception of motor fuels, which is forecasted to decline. Motor fuel receipts are expected to decrease about 0.4% over the next 3 quarters as gasoline consumption declines over the forecast period due to continued high prices at the pump and the subsequent freeze in the average wholesale price of fuel that occurred via an emergency regulation. The other significant road fund account, motor vehicle usage tax, is forecasted to increase 7% over the first 3 quarters of FY23. In addition, motor vehicle license fees are expected to increase 2.8% in the first 9 months of FY 2023. Weight distance taxes are expected to grow 2.3%. Motor vehicle operator license taxes are forecasted to rise 13.7%, and investment income collections are projected to be about a negative $1 million. So that concludes my presentation, unless you have any questions.
Okay. I see no questions. Thank you very much for your presentation, and thank you for the good work you do. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Right, shall we go? Yeah, there you go. Next on the agenda is Bike Walk Kentucky. Mike Sewell and Jennifer Kirshner with the Kentuckians for Better Transportation. Floor is yours. Identify yourself for the record and please proceed.
Sure. Thank you, Chairman Higdon, as well as esteemed members of the committee. We appreciate your time today, and we are going to forego our PowerPoint just for a brief introduction since we are limited on time. My name is Mike Sewell. I am an engineer with Gresham Smith & Partners. I also serve as the president of Bike Walk Kentucky and on the national board of directors for the League of American Bicyclists.
I'm Jennifer Kirshner. Good to see you all. Thank you for having me today. I'm the Executive Director of Kentuckians for Better Transportation.
So as I mentioned, foregoing the presentation, it's just going to be a brief introduction to our organization and what we're hoping to accomplish. I think if anything has taught us much, it is that our transportation infrastructure truly is the lifeblood of our communities. I think beyond it moving goods and services, it's really the focus on people. I'm an engineer. I've got several esteemed members of the committee behind me, or of the attendees that are also engineers. And when we stood up and took the engineer's creed, it was for the protection of lives with our profession that we could influence. I think the demonstration today from the presentation is that they're doing a fantastic job of trying to stand up for what's right and keep people safe. And that's exactly what our organization is trying to do for the biking and pedestrian communities across our community. There are 4 basic pillars that we're standing for. Number 1 is advocacy. Not everyone has a voice. Not everyone can clearly communicate the safety issues that they're dealing with. And so we're hoping that we can aggregate those into meaningful chunks of information that you all can digest and then make informed decisions on as a committee. The second thing is safety. Of course, all members in this room, every single person in this room was a pedestrian at some point today. We just saw last week, Louisville is getting ready to overcome their yearly pedestrian deaths, and that's just one example of a very urban area. We're 8 months into the year, and they've already killed more people than they typically do in a year. And that's not standard. That's not something that we should stand for. And again, the last time I had the opportunity to talk to this committee was in passing the 3-foot rule for bicyclists. So I know that you all care about human life. I know you want to do what's right by people that are reliant on our most important public space, which is inside the right-of-way. The third thing we want to really focus on is assistance, support. We have lots of small communities that are experiencing what we call brain drain. People that have experienced larger cities. We have lots of sister cities that are outside of Kentucky that are doing fantastic things, building infrastructure that's enticing, building it that's comfortable, and also keeping people safer. When we have people experience those things, they tend to stay in those types of settings. We want to make sure that the locals, our smaller towns, understand the core pieces of things that they can do to better their infrastructure, and that's going to be done in partnership with folks like the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. And the last piece of that is tourism, economic development. I think the really important thing here to take away is people that are happy, people that can move between destinations safely, are happy. they spend more money. There was a really interesting study that was done out of Indiana where they have a pretty phenomenal trail system and multimodal kind of robust transportation network. Each of those users on average spent $3,500 to $3,600 extra per year on adjacent businesses. Adjacent businesses in our smaller communities that do have better pedestrian connectivity or bicycle connectivity on average earn 30 to 45% more net revenue per year. So it's good for us in Kentucky to really just acknowledge the connectivity issues that these folks have and support them in building better infrastructure. So I know that we had 20 minutes that we were going to talk, but I want to approach the topics you already had with solemnity and just limit my introduction to that. And Jennifer, if you have anything else to add.
I do. As most of you know, at KBT, we're a unified voice for all modes of transportation. And we work at the local, state, and federal level. And one of the ways that we try to accomplish those goals is through our committee structure. And with the introduction of the bipartisan infrastructure law, some of the funding that's coming through that, in discussions with our public transit and our safety committee, conversations with the cabinet, we saw that it was in best interest to reorganize that committee, and it is now the Public Transit Access and Safety. And simply put, what this does is it's a committee that will focus on the individual user in the transportation system. So whether you're walking to a bus or you're getting on a bike or you're driving your car, we all have to be compatible in the same environment, in the shared environment. There's a lot of proven methodologies that are very successful in doing this. One is complete streets. And I'll just read this. The concept of complete streets encompasses many approaches to planning, designing, and operating roadways and right-of-ways with all users in mind to create a transportation network that's safer and more efficient. I will mention too, in 2021, sadly, a report that it has been a 16-year high in traffic fatalities. So addressing safety is, and a lot of that is really what's made a lot of this funding bubble up in the bipartisan infrastructure law. I would like to just mention too briefly, when we talk about public transit and some of these issues with safety, we often think of urban settings, and it is very real, and it's a major issue in rural communities as well. We have nearly 30 million public transportation trips annually in Kentucky, and about half of those are in rural areas, and they consist of people going to dialysis, to their medical appointments, getting groceries. So, as Mike said, transportation and access is the lifeline for not only people getting to work, but also their quality of life, getting children to school safely. So we've seen in Louisville recently was very successful with securing 2 raised grants to redo 2 neighborhoods in Louisville. And I would also mention as an example, my background is in rural Kentucky and economic development and tourism. And our small communities are really struggling with this, whether it's your Main Street business owner. In my community of Danville, we've had fatalities just crossing on our Main Street. And that's the lifeline of our community. So it touches everyone's lives, whether it be for pleasure or for professional reasons. So I think this is an issue that we'll be very vocal about, and I look forward to working with you more on, because this is a Kentucky-wide, statewide issue, and we're very supportive of what the cabinet's doing to make these efforts to improve safety and connectivity.
Okay. Thank you, Owen. And, there's a lot of competition for transportation dollars.
Right.
And over the years, I've seen sidewalks primarily being a city responsibility. Now, when I see the road plan, there's a lot of sidewalks included, and there's some pushback from me on the amount of sidewalks that are requested, and like I said, the city's trying to pushing that off on us, and like I said, there's a lot of competition for those dollars. Now, I will commend the Transportation Cabinet, the TAP program. We hear a lot of, and that's a great place for cities and counties to go to for those alternative dollars, and like I said, not always in the transportation budget. So hopefully those TAP funds continue to grow, and we can continue to help in that way.
To that point, I would just say too, Senator Higdon, you're absolutely right. They're very competitive for dollars. And one of the things I think that's brilliant about Complete Streets is that not everywhere needs a sidewalk. Not everywhere needs a bike lane. Some lanes should just be for cars. And we should think about the total built environment and spend resources effectively and efficiently, so we're not putting bike lanes where they don't belong and we don't see any bikers using them. So to your point, yes, I hope that we become a lot more efficient and effective and smart with the funding these projects.
Okay. Thank you all. Certainly appreciate you being here. I see no questions. You did a fine job. So
Thank you.
you all.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Captain Marshall. We have, if you look in your packet there, we have 12 administrative regulations from the Kentucky State Police for consideration. With us today, Kentucky State Police are Captain Johnson of the Driver's Testing Branch and Brent Combs, Staff Attorney, Public and Justice and Public Safety Cabinet. I would ask that they introduce themselves for the record and give a brief description of these administrative regs. Okay, you're solo today, Captain Johnson. And again, Captain Johnson, welcome to the committee. You and I have had a lot of conversations over the last 6 months, and I always appreciate your responsive getting back to me on issues that we have, especially with the driver's license. So the floor is yours. Please identify yourself and for the record, and please proceed.
Thank you. I'm Captain Marshall Johnson with the Kentucky State Police Driver Testing Branch. Brent Combs could not make it today, so on behalf of Commissioner Philip Burnett and the Kentucky State Police, I thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. Outside of driver testing, the obvious things for the general testing that we do for Class D and M licenses, we have some other responsibilities that we take care of as part of the driver testing branch. Those include oversight and certification of the driver training schools here in Kentucky, and CDL skills testing, as well as we're an intricate part of the hazardous material endorsement process for CDL drivers. So the amendments to 502 KAR Chapter 10 bring the regulations into conformity with KRS Chapter 13A, which deal with those three items specifically. The amendments also reflect KSP's current procedures, revisions for the change to the regional office model that we're now using, and correct statutory authority. There are forms that have come into use since promulgation, since they were originally promulgated, and those are incorporated. The only regulatory change is in 502 KAR 10-070, which is to increase the allowable age of a training school fleet vehicle from 5 years to 10 years. I would ask that you please note that 502 KR Chapter 10 applies only to driver training schools for Class D licenses, except for 35, 110, and 120, which are specific to the CDL skills testing and hazardous material endorsements. So essentially, these proposed amendments will bring everything in line related to those issues.
Captain Johnson, thank you. Did any of these administrative regs deal with the new, changes to federal law?
They do not.
Okay. All right. Seeing no questions, we do not have to act on these. There was no objections raised in any of these regulations when it went before administrative regs. So, Captain Johnson, thank you for being here today. Certainly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Also, on item eight, a report received on the meeting materials page on our committee website is a July update on the staff study on electric vehicles and transportation funding. This report, which was compiled by the A&R staff, was mandated under House Bill 8 from last session. And we'll continue to get updates on that as we go forward. Our next meeting is Tuesday, September the 20th at 1 p.m. Seeing no further business, motion to adjourn. We have a motion. We are adjourned. Thank you.